session is being recorded. Welcome everybody. Thank you for taking the time to attend the NSS for this module. Just seems that we're writing never-ending assignments and ICE tasks, and I'm marking never-ending assignments and ICE tasks, but it's just that time of year. So we've only just finished marking the last one and we're about to get the next one in, but that's how it rolls. So we stick with the program. Guys, your assignment is due next week on the 27th. Please make sure it's in by 9 o'clock. There was a student in my group in the last submission who was so busy with his assignment, didn't notice the time, submitted at 8 minutes past 9, and unfortunately wasn't granted an extension on that. So it's really important you do keep an eye on the dates and the times for these submissions. Right. As usual, the same criteria applies. 100 marks for this paper with a total of 10 hours is really what time you should allow for completion of this assignment. Remember, no plagiarism, no copying from original sources. To put any direct quotes with quotation marks, okay, and no more than 10% of your paper can be direct quotes. And this assignment is quite research and referencing heavy, so please be aware of that. Please make every effort to paraphrase and not to quote continuously directly from text, because no more than 10% of it can be done like that. Type it up using the correct referencing, and we'll just touch on that at the end of the session. New section on each page. So there's all our usual guidelines, which I'm sure by now you are very familiar with. Again, so this assignment focuses on learning units 3 to 5. So those learning units for us is chapter 14 on stress, coping and health, chapter 15 on abnormal behavior, and chapter 16 on the treatment of abnormal behavior. And all that material will have been covered. There are rubrics given to you at the end of the question paper, and we get a marking memo which guides us in our marking. Make sure you reference all your sources correctly and you apply any relevant examples. And because this is quite a technically referencing heavy assignment, please make sure that you check all of your referencing, that it is correct the whole way through your paper. It's consistent, it's done correctly, your reference list is done correctly, because that will be under scrutiny in this paper. And there again is the link at the bottom to the online writing lab from Purdue, and their resources are really phenomenal. So if you are unsure of any referencing, go straight to Purdue and check your referencing so that you know you get it right. It's really important for this assignment. Okay, let's just move on to the questions. Question 1. A healthy lifestyle is a way of living that will make sure you're on the right track to having a healthy mind and a healthy soul. So note from this explanation, it says conduct necessary research and explain in your own words the meaning of healthy lifestyle, and explain how you yourself maintain a healthy lifestyle daily. Reflect under the headings of decision making, character building, emotional development, physical development, and cognitive development. So there are 5 headings there, and each heading, as per the rubric given to you, is worth 6 marks. So in order to get those 6 marks, you need to explain how you personally maintain a healthy lifestyle. So it's quite reflective on a daily basis, focusing on your decision-making processes, character building, emotional development, physical development, and cognitive development. And there are the levels of achievement there. What I suggest that you do, it says to you, conduct necessary research. Can we out the headings in our answer as subheadings? I think that means put, but yes, you're welcome to put the subheadings. That's absolutely fine. But my suggestion is, and what I've said on the side there, is that with each of those concepts like decision making or character building or emotional development, what you need to do first is to research what that concept means. So what I say to you is operationalize each concept first. So if you say to me, I ensure I get enough sleep daily, if that is for physical development to ensure you're in peak form physically, make sure you define first what you mean by physical development, and then make sure that your examples support how you've defined it. Character building theory. I don't know what you mean by theory, Sasha, but it's basically there's some work in your textbook on what it means to lead a healthy lifestyle, but those actual concepts, you're going to have to just define them yourself. So in terms of decision making means, and think about it in terms of a healthy lifestyle. So research about, it's about making, for example, good decisions. I try and make good decisions, but define what you mean by decision making. Character building, it's understanding what character building is. Yes, define them and then apply how you relate to it. Yes. So character building, if you sort of Google character building, you can come up with various definitions, and sometimes there's a bit of overlap between character building and maybe emotional development. But as long as you give it a definition, sort of your understanding of what it means, and provide an example that relates to the definition that you've given. So define what, from your perspective, emotional development means, and support it with your example, as long as those two things relate. So don't just say to me, in terms of character building, I do this. You need to operationalize for you what character building means. Yes, you can use the first person because it's asking you to. It's asking you to say, in terms of your lifestyle, what do you do? Okay, so it is inferring to you that you need to give some kind of personal reflection. We're doing a lot of personal reflection lately, but it is a good way to understand how this applies. So all I'm saying to you is make sure in your question, you give what you understand that particular term to mean. And it's not, character building is quite a wide term, but just define it operationally. So operationalize it and then give your example. Okay, so with the marks and the 6 marks per heading, I'll have to understand that you understand what that concept means, and that you can provide an example that relates to how you've defined it. Okay, but if you've done research to get that character building, if you've said according to XYZ character building means, make sure you reference where you've got that definition from. Take out the eraser and scrubs. Okay, Lou. So do you guys understand? Because physical development can mean, it's a very broad thing. So define what physical development means, and then give it an example for your own circumstances. Cognitive development is big. So again, just operational it. It means that we have a healthy way of thinking, or whatever it might be, and just operationalize it. Okay, so I've given you an example at the bottom, and please don't take this as gospel, but I'm just showing to you how a definition, if you put character building into Google, you'll get the process of becoming emotionally stronger, more independent, and better dealing with problems. So that's quite a wide definition. Okay, and it also links a little bit to emotional development. So just make sure there's no overlap between your definitions, but that's in your hands, and I'm sure you'll manage that quite capably. You've all shown that you've got the good ability to reflect very well. So it's not a difficult question. It's quite straightforward, as long as you tell us what you mean by your particular heading. Okay, the second question is a lovely essay question, but the rubric has been very kind to you, and it's given you quite a substantial amount of guidance. And what you see from this essay question is the actual theoretical component of it is really half the mark. Okay, the other half of the mark comes from your ability to write an essay well, with a suitable introduction, conclusion, to write it academically soundly, and to do the research and cite the research. So the question itself is for 40 marks, and it breaks it down very clearly for you into the different contributions to that mark allocation. So when it comes to the introduction, and please, what I don't want to see is I don't want to see this as a thing about filling in the missing words here. So I don't want to see anxiety disorders are defined as, and you just, so try and please write, take this as a guide, but try and write it in your own words so that it's not just taken as an exercise of filling in the missing words. Okay, I would really like to see some effort at writing your own introduction. Okay, so you get 5 marks for a good introduction. We've had a lot of work, a lot of essays in the last semester, and you've done this before. Okay, so make sure, add your references where you need to, but just make sure you write a good introduction. It's worth 5 marks. Then the second part of this, the actual body, that's where the theory comes in. Okay, and it's asking you for 2 paragraphs, or basically 2 sections there. It's looking at the biological and psychological causes of anxiety disorder. So it very specifically says to you anxiety disorders, and it wants to have 1 section on what the biological causes are. Remember that those are the etiology. So when it says etiology in the question, it means what causes anxiety disorder. And it's very clearly in your textbook. So it wants 1 section on the biological causes and 1 section on the psychological causes. And this is where the referencing comes in, because if we go back to the first slide, it says at the top, in the essay structure, explain the biological and psychological causes. You are required to use 2 journal articles. Okay, and we'll touch on the journal articles shortly, but please note that you have to use 2 journal articles. You can use your textbook, but in addition to your textbook, we have to see that you have used 2 journal articles. Okay. So you'll have a paragraph or 10 marks worth, 2 paragraphs on the biological causes. And in that, you have to have shown that you've taken a journal article, okay, and you have interpreted the journal article and you've used it sufficiently in your explanation. And again, with the psychological etiology, exactly the same. That will be where your second journal article comes in. So you might find 1 that is to do with the biological causes and 1 to do with the psychological causes, but you have to show that you've used those journal articles in explaining your answer. Okay, so you can use your textbook, but you need to make sure you have put in correct journal articles. 5 marks for the conclusion. People always struggle with the conclusion, but don't bring any new points into the conclusion. Okay, you're not raising something that hasn't been raised in your essay. Remember, you're really concluding your essay. So from the points made in this essay, it can be concluded that. So it's a short, well-written sort of summary of what's been in your essay. And there's 5 marks for that conclusion. There's 5 marks to adherence to this essay guideline table. So have you completed the essay according to this table with a suitable conclusion, introduction, body, conclusion? And when we look at academic writing, we also look at your grammar and your punctuation, that your referencing is correct and that your academic writing style is correct. So you're writing in full sentences, in complete paragraphs, that there's no bullet points, there's no missing capital letters where they need to be. Okay, so that's really important that you adhere to their guidelines, but ultimately what it's saying to us is, can you write academically? So that's where it's an easy 5 marks for rereading your essay, making sure all your grammar and all your punctuation is sound and it looks and sounds like a piece of academic writing. Okay, that's quite clear. And then the final 5 marks are for the use of the 2 articles. So to us, that means that you have chosen appropriate articles. Okay, and remember it says journal articles. It doesn't say just articles, it's wanting journal articles. And that you've used the articles correctly and sufficiently. So you haven't just thrown it in as a citation at the end of a long paragraph. You've actually said, according to Green and Brown 2017, in a study done, it was concluded that. Okay, so you're actually taking that information from the journal article and applying it to your text. So it's really important. Those 5 marks are important, that people have chosen the correct articles and they've used them exceptionally for the full 5 marks. Okay, not just thrown them in at the end of a direct quote. It's actually showing us that you can interpret them, understand them, and apply them. And I see Lou stopped erasing and sighing, so maybe Lou, you haven't got this far in your assignment yet. Okay, are you all clear on that question 2? All right, as to how to do that. Question 3 is to discuss, okay, insight therapies for 10 marks and behavior therapies for 10 marks as 2 different and major treatments for abnormal behavior. And it says to you again, reference at least 1 journal article for each major treatment. So you can see this assignment is quite heavy on your ability to research and your ability to find relevant journal articles. So the marking rubric for this one says that basically if you take insight therapies and behavior therapies, there would be 10 marks for each. Okay, and remember it says discuss. So again, you know, it's not just citing a definition from somewhere, it's showing that you can understand and that there's actually a comparison between the 2 approaches. And then half the mark, or another 10 marks again, is reference at least 1 journal article for each major treatment. The articles must be relevant and appropriately used. If you are discussing something, Michelle, yeah, you can, but you don't need subheadings for this. You can just do it as 2 separate paragraphs, but you don't need subheadings necessarily. So you're just going to write it as a discussion between the 2. So insight therapies is, in comparison to behavior therapies, it does this. So you don't need subheadings for this. I would write it as one essay. So from the questions now, we can see that we need to apply ourselves to research. And guys, if you've got any problems with doing research and finding suitable journal articles using the VC online library, because that's where you're going to have to go to. You're going to have to use those resources because that's where you will have a wealth of journal articles available to you, and use the search conditions to find relevant ones. But you need to make sure that when we say a journal article, these are articles that are published in academic and professional journals. Okay, it's not Very Well Mind, it's not Simply Psychology, it's not Cherry or McLeod or any of that. It's people who've actually done research, published it, it's been reviewed, and it's there in the academic journals. There's a nice guide. I put a website at the bottom. Covenant Seminary. I found quite a nice useful guide on there, and just making sure we understand what a journal article is. And if you're unsure about your journal article, that you don't think it's a journal article, you're welcome to say, is this appropriate? I don't mind that. So the little picture on the right, which you can't really see, is an example of what a journal looks like. Back in the old days, before we had the internet, there were big bound volumes of research papers. And the journals get released a number of times a year, maybe once a year, once every second year, but that's what a journal is. So make sure you understand you've got good journal articles. And again, this is where you need to be clear, is you need to understand how to reference a journal article. So as much as we can find them, we need to be able to reference them. And what I've put at the top is an example of referencing a journal. And so I'm always afraid to go out of the box, especially because this time it says 2 journal articles. I stick to that. But if you, no, it doesn't. We're going to look that you've used 2 sufficiently well. Rather find 1 good journal article that you need and use it well than citing multiple journal articles. So remember, the marks for the question is 10 marks for the biological or 10 marks for the psychological. You only really need to show us that you can use 1 in each instance. So rather do quality than quantity, because quantity you can often do badly. Okay. So when we look at the journal article and the referencing, at the bottom is what's taken from the Purdue example. So we have the authors and the year. We then have the title of the article. So in the top example, the title of that journal article is Emotions in Storybooks, a comparison of storybooks that represent ethnic and racial groups in the United States. Then it's followed by the title of the journal itself. So it could be Journal of Child Psychology or Journal of Applied Psychology, but the actual name of the journal. Then that is followed by the volume number, and you'll see very clearly there's a volume number, and often within the volume there's an issue number. So you need to make sure you've got the volume number and the issue number. You put the pages in of the journal of that particular, if you've got a big, think of it that you've got a big thick book full of all the different articles, you put in the pages of that article, so that in that particular journal, the volume and the issue number, that particular article is from pages 8 to 207 to 217, and then you put in your DOI if you've got it. You don't need retrieved from, because remember in APA referencing, retrieved from is not necessary. And if the DOI is there, then you need to put in your DOI. Okay, so when we check the referencing, we're going to make sure, having given you this example, okay, that you followed it to the letter. So the name of the actual article, the title of the article, the title of the periodical in italics, the volume number, the issue number, the page number, and the DOI. Okay, so it's all there quite comprehensively for you to do. So that is the assignment. Yeah, it will take some time on research, but I do say to you that if you don't understand journal articles, if you're not finding a way to access them, then speak to the online librarian and do it sooner rather than later. You can come up with multiple journal articles, but you just need to skim and scan one quickly to see if it's relevant. If it's not relevant, move on to the next one and move on to the next one. So you don't need to read in detail. Often it's there in the introduction and you can understand that it's relevant to what you're discussing, then use it. Okay, but rather go for the quality of your application rather than the quantity of referencing. Guys, that was not too long, so I don't know if anyone else has got any other questions or wants me to go back to any problems. It's a discussion. So, Robin, when we discuss something, there is an element of comparison rather than just, to me, two outlines. This is one, this is the other, because they are different and they are a comparison. So it's how you put it together. Discuss them, and you can, it would be good to use a comparison, but it's up to you. It's not necessary because it doesn't say compare, it does say discuss, but in light of the discussion, there are two different approaches. So you're discussing what they are, and then you can mention ways in which they're different. Okay, you'll see that in your discussion. But it doesn't necessarily say compare, so I'm not looking for a table with comparisons. I'm sure you need to see that you can show that they're two different, because the question says to you as two different and major treatments. So therefore you do need to be able to show and indicate how they are different from each other. The word count for the essay, I don't know. I mean, the essay is, if we look at the essay, let's just go back to the essay question. Your essay question, you've got two 10-mark paragraphs there. So a good, decent 10-mark paragraph with suitable referencing, for 10 marks, I would be looking at probably about a third of the page for each of those paragraphs. And then you have to include your introduction and conclusion. So your essay probably is not going to be longer than about a page and a half. Okay, rather go for quality, make sure you get it right, because a lot of those marks are coming from the guidelines and use of the references, etc. So as long as you've got the important points in, you've got the correct referencing, and you've discussed, I mean, I would say sort of up to half a page for each of those paragraphs, if you do it sufficiently. Okay, are there any other questions? The online librarian is really helpful. And seriously, if you're not managing with the accessing the library or not sure, please log a ticket and do it earlier rather than later. So maybe now rather start looking for your research articles first and then start to put the body of your essay together. All right. Guys, are there any other questions? Quiet. You don't have to use the textbook, but you have to use the journals. Okay, but you probably will need to use the textbook. So you can use the textbook and you're entitled to use the textbook. But in addition to your textbook, there must be those journal articles. We don't mark you down for using the textbook. You probably do need to use it. So it just doesn't replace the journal articles. All right, any questions, you're welcome to pop. Alma says wait. I don't know what I'm waiting for, but you're welcome to email both Kath and I if you've got any problems, and please make use of all the resources at your disposal. You've got this, guys. Just think how warm and ready we'll be for the exam with all of this work that we've had to do in the last few weeks. So yeah, it's not difficult, but just good application is important. All right. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording. So you guys have a good evening. I will upload the recording probably first thing tomorrow. So Michelle, Alma's question above. I've lost Alma's question. Alma said thank you. So can we use the IE library to find journal articles? Yes, you do use the IEE library. You go on and search their databases. But if you're struggling to find, just ask the online librarian. Almus's question above. I'm looking for Almus's question. Would it be if we do use more? No, it's like I said to Lou earlier, Almus, you need to use the required amount. If you use more than the required amount, it doesn't increase your marks. It basically, it all adds to the quality of your answer, but don't create more problems for yourself by getting too intricate with too many journal articles. Okay. So as long as it supports what you're doing. You shouldn't get journals that you have to buy, because through VC library, through the institutional registration, you should have access without paying. So if you do, please ask the online librarian just to guide you through accessing appropriate articles. Okay, you shouldn't have to buy anything. Yeah, please check with Margaret. All right, guys, I'm stopping the record. And for questions, are we using for question 1, yes, you can use the subheadings. That's absolutely fine, because it's asking you to look at those different issues. So subheadings is not a problem, Gaia. But I will upload the recording.